What's up, Indiana fans? Welcome to another episode of the Indiana Hoosiers Roundtable podcast. I am Brandon Brown, joined as always by Todd Golden. And Todd, you had a pretty cool opportunity to sit down and talk with Darian DeVries for a little bit, and that gave you some opportunities to get a lot of information about him as a man, where he came from, his background, some stuff about basketball. Obviously, just a pretty cool opportunity to speak to the head coach. I guess just talk about that interview for a second, and maybe your first impressions of really kind of dealing with him, personally.
Yeah, it was something that we set up. Hoosiers on SI set up with Darian DeVries, and since recruiting is in a dead period, we were able to do that on Friday before the Final Four, and it was a good opportunity. We did it in his office. His office is not yet decorated, so if you wanted any kind of IU, I wish I had taken some pictures, although they would have been pretty boring. I mean, he's hit the ground running. He hasn't had time to do stuff like decorate his office, but we talked about a variety of topics, several of which I've written about already. But we went into his background. We went into his goals for the team, how he intends to play. I know I specifically asked him about defense, how he intends to play that. So it was kind of a all-encompassing conversation, and it was good to speak with him. I have covered Darian DeVries before, indirectly. When he was at Drake, I was covering the Missouri Valley, so I was familiar with some of what he was able to do there. But I didn't want to solely focus on that. I wanted to make sure we were talking about Indiana and what he intended for the program, and said some interesting things. One was, I have the quote up here. It says, "A few years later, now you're the head coach at Indiana." He was reflecting on his background, and he said, "And you see those banners hanging in Assembly Hall. It's something that we want to strive to bring another banner. We want to put another one up there beside them." So, all coaches say things like that, but it was good to hear him have that as a goal and not be too intimidated by the fact that, that's what most Indiana fans want to get back to. So that was among the things we talked about. There were several other things as well.
When you sent me the show notes for today, I was kind of looking about, some of the things you said that he said and some of the things you asked him about. I guess, is there one centralized, principle, philosophy? I mean, what kind of a coach is he? I mean, I know you listed here the importance of defense and how much of a focus there is on that. You just mentioned the banner. Obviously, that's kind of a long-term, big picture goal. But yeah, what were some things that just kind of stuck out? Like, what kind of a coach is he? What kind of a team is this going to be under him?
Well, he said it a lot already. I mean, he's somebody who's built up on work ethic and believing in what he has learned over his time as an assistant coach. His work ethic comes first. He just feels like, his ability to go in there and grind and in every aspect of the job, whether it's implementing his offense, implementing his defense, recruiting, that's the backbone of everything he does. He cited growing up in his farm in Iowa. He grew up in a very small town, Applington in Iowa. I wrote about this earlier this week. Population barely over 1,000. And, through that background, he was able to kind of hone his own personal work ethic in terms of how he approaches everything, not just his basketball job. And, it took some time. I mean, he was an assistant coach at Creighton for 20 years. And that's, most coaches who do that amount of time don't always get a chance to be a head coach. Once he did, he took advantage of it. But what I think, he has principles in the way he wants to run the offense, many of which he's explained to the public already in terms of, he wants early offense from defense when possible. You look at his tempo stats. When they don't get that, he's comfortable running in a half-court set. He doesn't run a lot of set plays. He wants his three-point shooters to be ready, but also to move around, not to stay static. Defensively, he mentioned, that's a huge focus for him. He focuses on that first. And what I remember of his teams, watching him up close and personal at Drake, was, and it's something that you're not going to see in a KenPom, efficiency stat, is how tough his teams were. I mean, he wants his teams to play really tough and really hard defensively. He puts a lot of emphasis on that. I mean, you can get into the bones of, whether it's man-to-man. He primarily almost entirely runs man-to-man off or defense. But it's the way he wants it played that kind of he feels can help his team stick out. He wants it to be physical, and he wants the other team to know that they're on the floor playing defense. So those were some of the things that were brought up. But that's all very important to him. And he's obviously had to hit the ground running with the transfer portal being open, but he's confident that he can bring in the pieces to make Indiana successful. And that's the other thing is, and he's mentioned this before too, he's not going to compromise on fit. So fans who are out there, and I don't mean this to be pejorative, but that are living and dying with every player who makes a visit that may or may not actually commit to Indiana, bear in mind that Darian DeVries, his mission is to find the right fit. So sometimes those players may not fit, or if they choose to go elsewhere, he's got other options in mind. So he's got a plan, and he will stick with it. He is hard to deviate off of a plan. So it was impressive to hear him explain his philosophy on those things, and to impart it in a way that that I think everybody can relate to. And it's some things that Mike Woodson probably did in his own way, but, in other ways didn't do. So I think it was fascinating to talk to him about that, and came away impressed with his commitment to do it.
One last thing on that, because you kind of just touched on it a little bit there. One of the other notes you sent me, that he spoke of not compromising his principles when it comes to recruiting. I think that's that probably means something a little different nowadays than it did 5 or 10 years ago. But what does that mean? I mean, with the Indiana brand and NIL, and we're gonna get into the settlement here towards the end of the show. But yeah, just what does that look like under him? Obviously, coming from a place like Drake to Indiana, you can do some things a little differently when it comes to the recruiting trail.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is he's, he doesn't say it this way. These are my words, but he's not going to do what was previously done, which was to amass talent and hope that it comes together. That's what Mike Woodson did. He's going to get guys who, if he's going to put together a jigsaw puzzle, he's going to make sure all the puzzle pieces fit, not just kind of hope that they fit. And so, there may be a guy out there who would normally be Indiana with its NIL resources might go after just because they could potentially get him. Well, maybe that'll happen, maybe not, because maybe that player doesn't fit what DeVries wants to do offensively or defensively. So I think that's something that, we're in a period of time where a lot of fans get really enthralled with the shiny object syndrome to some degree, where, oh my gosh, there's this guy that we're targeting and he averaged X amount of points and all that. I mean, first of all, you don't get everybody no matter what your resources are. And secondly, everybody was thrilled about guys like Mackenzie Mbako and Bryson Tucker, who were, allegedly 4 or 5 star recruits, but they didn't fit. And so if they don't fit, all the talent, that might be there can't be taken advantage of. So I think DeVries is going to do a much better job of trying to put players together that complement each other's talents and then go from there. So yeah, at Indiana, he'll be able to recruit that kind of talent at a higher level, but he's not just going to go grab people just for the sake of there being 5-star recruits. It doesn't, we've seen it over the last 2 years. It doesn't really work. So that's kind of where he's coming from on recruiting.
Well, you spoke to it already. He did hit the ground running. He's been doing some work in the transfer portal. They've already added a few players. Connor Enright from Drake, Tucker DeVries from Drake, and Reed Bailey from Davidson. So some smaller school guys, but that's kind of the name of the game. These smaller school guys, when they play up and they're clearly at the top of their class, they end up going to some of these bigger schools, and then you kind of see how it works out. So what is the outlook for those 3 guys, and how good were they at the small school, and can it translate to a place like Indiana and in the Big Ten?
Well, Connor Enright and Tucker DeVries both did stop between Drake and Indiana. Enright was at DePaul last year. Darian DeVries would have had Connor Enright 2 years ago as his point guard at Drake. Enright's numbers, um, scoring numbers don't jump out. He's never averaged double figures. What did jump out last year playing for Chris Holtman at DePaul was his assist numbers took a big leap. He averaged 6.2 assists per game with the Blue Demons in the Big East as they're trying to get their program in order. But he's played for Darian DeVries before, so there's institutional knowledge there. He'll know what kind of concepts DeVries wants to run offensively. And the one thing that Darian DeVries has always had is a good point guard. At West Virginia last year, he had Javon Small. The point guard I remember at Drake, who was really good, most Indiana fans probably don't know the name, but I do, was Roman Penn, who played there for 4 years, was an all Missouri Valley Conference player, and was just gritty and tough. Just made good decisions, didn't turn the ball over too much, and truly was the head of the snake for that team on both ends of the floor. So I think he's hoping for a similar result from Connor Enright. Will Connor Enright be all they add to that position? I'm sure not, but it's somebody that he's comfortable with. And obviously same thing with Tucker DeVries, who would have been, one of the highest coveted portal ads of any team if he would have, been willing to play for somebody other than his dad. So, but in Tucker, they get a career average 17.7 point per game scorer, 36.7% three-point shooter. He did go up to 47% for West Virginia in the brief time he played last year. He only played 8 games before a shoulder injury knocked him out for the year. He's going to shoot a lot. I mean, that's what I recall of watching Tucker DeVries a little up close and personal early in his career. He's averaged over his career 13.7 shots per game. So he is not afraid. If he gets an open shot, he's flinging it. And a lot of times he's making it. He can also, he also embodies to some degree the toughness that Darian DeVries wants on the other end of the floor. He can play physical. He's basically a small forward, but a bigger one, and he's not afraid to get down and dirty on the other end of the floor. So Tucker DeVries will be, would have been a quality ad for any program, but he knows what he's doing playing for his dad, and that's a good, unsurprising, but a good get for Indiana. And then Reed Bailey, who committed over the weekend, is a 6'11" stretch forward. He's averaged 12.4 points per game for his career, 18.8 at Davidson last year, and shot 41% from three-point range. DeVries likes to have guys who are versatile, big guys who are versatile. So Indiana fans are going to see a lot of shooters on the floor from all angles, and Reed Bailey kind of fits that mold. And I didn't mention him, because he's not a transfer portal ad, but Trent Sisley, in many ways, the incoming freshman, has many of those same attributes too. So he's putting together the pieces. He still has a lot more pieces to add, but it's a good start.
Great segue then. Who's still next? Who's next? Who's Indiana still looking at? What else could happen with the roster, over the next couple months?
A lot of names being thrown out there. How many of them are legitimate? Who knows? The one to keep an eye on this weekend is Lamar Wilkerson, who's a 6'4" shooting guard from Sam Houston State. He actually played at IU this past year. They played each other, scored 18 points in the game at Assembly Hall that IU won rather easily. He's highly sought after. He averaged 20.5 points per game last year at Sam Houston, shot 44% from three-point range, averaged 4 rebounds. Based on his stats, he would be a coveted ad, and Indiana is not alone in pursuing him. He's got visits scheduled to Kentucky, Ole Miss, and I'm forgetting the other team, another SEC school, and Indiana. So whether he takes all those visits, we'll see. Kentucky is thought to be highly competitive for him, but so is Indiana. So that'd be a good get for Indiana, and he fits the mold of what Darian DeVries wants from his guards. Other names brought up, some of these, are in the mix. IU is supposedly interested in Rodney Rice from Maryland, who was a nice wing for the Terrapins this past season. Division II player Elijah Freeman, who's being sought by many from Lincoln Memorial, high-scoring player, a lot of upside. And one name that came up earlier this week is Nick Lewis, who had committed to Xavier, but when they switched coaches, he reopened his recruitment, a point guard. So those are among, there's many more, but those are some. And, the dead period ends on Friday. So you'd think the activity would pick up again starting on Friday. Right now, players can commit, they can verbally commit, but they don't formally commit until starting tomorrow again. So a little bit of a pause, but things will really start cracking again this weekend.
Lamar Wilkerson's Final Four: Indiana, Kentucky, Auburn, and Ole Miss. So there you go. That's pretty formidable foursome there. So obviously Indiana would have some work to do against those other three schools. Two of them for sure. I mean, Ole Miss had a nice run as well, but I mean Auburn and Kentucky have, kind of speak for themselves a little bit. So that'd be a good get. That'd be a great get for Indiana. On the women's side of things, there's some movement there as well. We talked about on the last episode Yarden Garzon entering the transfer portal, which I know is a pretty big deal. I believe you told me leading scorer for Indiana last year. Was that right? So obviously that's a pretty big loss, and she committed to Maryland, so staying in the Big Ten Conference, which is always interesting. But the Hoosiers did add two new players, Chloe Spreen from Alabama and Phoenix Stotine from Arkansas. So the women's, just like every other team, also doing work in the transfer portal.
Yeah, it hurt that Garzon went to Maryland. I mean, that's a double blow for Indiana. Obviously, she stayed in conference. Obviously, a team that Indiana has competed with up near the top of the Big Ten. Maryland's got a great program. Don't really know the detail on what made Maryland appealing to Yarden, but obviously she's Indiana's all-time leader in three-point makes. So that's leaving anyway was a big blow, but to stay in the Big Ten hurts even a little bit more. I think if the schedule stays as it is, I don't think she comes back and plays here because Maryland played here this past season. But that's the portal. It's the way it goes. As for the players, they added Chloe Spreen as a former Miss Basketball here in Indiana from nearby in Bedford, Indiana. Didn't play much for Alabama this past season, so it'll be interesting to see how Indiana approaches what her role will be. And same thing with Phoenix Stotine, I guess. I'm not exactly sure. I know it's Stotine of some degree, but also didn't play. She played more than Spreen did at Alabama, but didn't play a ton at Arkansas either. So a couple of guards that I'm sure Terry Morin is hoping achieves the higher athleticism and skill level that she was seeking this season to rebuild the roster. So still a ways to go for the women as well in terms of getting commitments in, but those two players are a start.
So both basketball programs at Indiana. I mean, it's like you said, it's everywhere. This is not specific to what's going on in Indiana, or maybe a little bit more work for Darian DeVries as a new coach. I mean, you see that whenever a coach switches jobs, it's almost like they have to build an entire roster from scratch in most cases now. Not a lot of holdovers with how the transfer portal works, but that's where we are these days. And one of the things that's going to have an effect on recruiting and transfer portal stuff and roster, building and all that good stuff. The House settlement hearing on Monday. So you were the expert on this. You taught me a lot about it the last time we talked about this. So I'm curious to hear the latest on the House settlement that did take place on, was it Monday? I think, right? Monday the 7th. Right.
Yeah.
What was the outcome? What does it mean? And how soon are we going to see and feel the effects of what happened on Monday?
Well, there was not a judgment made on the ruling. That this isn't a jury trial or anything like that. This is something that the judge, Claudia Wilkin, rules on, and her instructions to those who are seeking this settlement. She essentially at the end of the day on Monday, kind of gave a tepid thumbs up to the settlement, but she wants two things fixed, and there'll be another hearing, I think, this coming Monday on whether these things get resolved or not. One thing that she was concerned about was the change in the language on how future college athletes are bound to this agreement. So her point is that, if you're in high school right now and you have an issue with the House settlement, this agreement basically binds you to that without ever having had a say in your own future of it. So from a legal point of view, she wants that taken care of by the bodies that are coming to the agreement on this settlement. So that was one thing, and that's probably something that it'll be. I'm not an attorney, obviously, but that's something I would hope can be dealt with. The bigger deal is and we talked about this. I think we talked about this a little bit last week. But one of the things that's been brought up as an objection to the House settlement are the roster caps that are going to come in as part of it. So in the past, it was scholarship limits. There won't be any more scholarship limits, but what it'll be replaced with are roster limits for each sport. So basketball will be 15. Football, I believe it's been discussed, will be around 90 to 100. But that's it. It's a hard cap. It's like the NFL. You can't go over it. So what that's done is that a lot of fans don't understand that most sports aren't full scholarship sports. They split scholarships. In the scholarship limit days, I mean, some sports were as low as like 4 scholarships where their roster would actually be well above that. And with roster limits, a lot of the kids that would have been walk-ons are not going to be able to continue to be on teams. So sports like swimming, baseball, several others have always had a high volume of people who didn't play much but were on the team. And most of those athletes, or a lot of those athletes, are going to lose their access to playing at least at a high level of college. It will trickle down, but it'll trickle down to the people who trickled down before in the first place, et cetera. So the judge expressed a lot of concern about that, and her solution was for schools to grandfather in athletes that have already committed, so they're protected, and then phase in the limits as they phase out. The problem with that is that schools have set their budgets to having these roster caps already. So the NCAA, and we haven't seen much comment from the schools or conferences yet, but it would create a budget problem for most schools who have already tried to adjust to this supposed new way of doing things. So the NCAA definitely objected during the hearing and said they said in effect that it was a deal breaker. Whether they hold to that or not, we'll see, because the problem is the NCAA, if they don't agree to this settlement, they're on the hook for something like, and the schools are on the hook for something like $20 billion. So it's something that would pretty much have a really profound effect on athletics in terms of how they would continue to go on. So there is motivation for this to be settled. So there will be motivation on the part of the NCAA, the conferences, and the schools to come to an agreement about the grandfathering. And we'll see. If they don't, would Judge Wilkin approve the settlement anyway? Nobody really knows. If she doesn't, it's going to be chaos, because schools have been kind of, I wouldn't say jumping the gun, but planning for the new age of the House settlement. So if the House settlement doesn't come into effect, it's going to be quite a bit of wild, wild west. And we'll see what that means for player commitments that have been done. As far as basketball recruiting, which is what we mentioned it in the context of last week, this basically gave, because the settlement hasn't been done yet, it gave another at least a week for coaches to sign players under the old system. And it may be longer than that. I mean, it's conceivable that Judge Wilkin takes into advisement whatever is said on Monday and then makes a ruling later. So we're also getting into the football. Post-spring football portal opens here pretty soon. So that sport is going to be affected. All sports are going to be affected. So there's a lot riding on where this goes. And, a lot of people want stability in college sports in terms of NIL and the transfer portal. You're never going to have it the way it was, but the powers that be are motivated to get this done. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to her instructions.
Man, you did my head almost hurts, but you did a phenomenal job explaining it. But man, it's just it's a lot, moving parts, very, very different from how it used to be. And like you said,
it bores people, to be honest.
Yeah,
but
I mean, it's not that exciting, but if it directly affects how things are going to be done, I mean, you talked about it last week, how people might be trying to get under the gun with the old system. Now it's even
teams are doing
stretched
that
out.
And the numbers for, and there's been a lot of reporting about this, but the numbers for the players pre-House are through the roof. I think it's I think last week I said IU might be laying out double what they laid out last year. It might be more than that. I mean, for the numbers that you're hearing for elite level players. Now, not everybody IU has pulled in would be considered elite, I guess, but the cost of doing business has risen exponentially, because agents for these players are using this as, hey, we want to get paid before this settlement comes into play. And then you have a cap to worry about and a clearinghouse for NIL deals. So I understand it from the player point of view, but it's making the cost of business really high.
I was trying to find. I'm sure you probably saw it too. I can't remember the kid's first name. The Gillespie kid who was at Maryland.
Yeah, Jacoby Gillespie. Yep.
Jacoby Gillespie, and they compared his earnings to Connor Gillespie, who's in the NBA. He's making like 6 times the amount of money as the NBA player, which
that's what collective bargaining does. And that's what, a lot of fans don't want to go there. It's taken me a long time to get there myself. But the bottom line is that if you want salary control and you want this supposedly, reined in, although it's not my money. I mean, I don't care what, if some booster wants to go pay $5 million for a player, that's their business. It doesn't really affect me much. But if you want this to have some modicum of structure, the only way to do that is, unfortunately, is to make these players employees and collectively bargain it. Otherwise, this isn't going to end. The caps will control it a little bit in terms of what they're directly compensated, and we don't know what the market value is going to be attached to these NIL deals. So till the only thing I could, and actually collective bargaining was brought up during the House settlement hearing on Monday. Judge Wilkins said it isn't in her purview with this case, but she did seem to endorse that it would probably be the best option going forward. So, and not every school is created equally. Indiana's athletic budget is far higher than mid-major budgets. The athletic cap that's set is higher than a lot of Division I full athletic budgets. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. It's not the good old days of 4 years in college and you're out. But that's what we have.
It was, I believe, Jacoby Gillespie got $3 million. That's the report, to go to Tennessee.
Yeah,
and Connor Gillespie gets $560,000 a year playing in the NBA. Yeah. So it's just wild.
The thing to be careful about with the numbers thrown out, though, is that the people who throw those numbers out are people who are trying to drive prices up. So
sure.
I do know that some of the numbers that have been quoted in the past were probably wildly high. Now, maybe this year, apparently they're way, they're in that kind of range. So, because of the way the market is set up for this particular portal season. So good timing for the players who came in this day and age. The players from 5 years ago are probably wondering where their bag is, but that's life. So,
man, yeah. You hear this all the time too. You just think about some of the just meteoric stars that have been, that have come through college athletics over the past 20, 40, whatever it might be. As a Michigan guy, you look back at the Fab Five. Guys like Zion Williamson and Tim Tebow. These monstrous, characters who could have made millions and millions of dollars and didn't get to make any. And now you got guys like, no offense to Jacoby Gillespie, but that guy's not changing the game of college basketball.
Right.
And he might be getting $3 million. It's crazy. What a wild time. Well, Todd, thanks so much for the breakdown on the House settlement. You educate me every time we talk about it, so I'm sure the listeners appreciate that as well. And all the breakdown on Darian DeVries and what's going on with the women's basketball side of things and all the expertise you always bring about Indiana. We really appreciate it, Todd.
All right. Thanks a lot.